Who's a good scorpion? Who's a good scorpion? Hi, Cicerone here with another build guide, and this is for a Herald of Agony Juggernaut, which is an incredibly tanky build, and it actually has a decent amount of damage at the end game, but pretty much no matter what, it feels terrible for mapping. It is not a good clear speed build, and just something that is like really nice, especially for hardcore, for taking out the harder bosses like the Feared, Uber Elder, and Uber Azeri, and I'm currently playing this and using it for that purpose. So we can see here we have a POB, and Organic has done some next level stuff once again. As per normal, we have like the normal leveling tree, and for this build we're going to be leveling with Ground Slam. Gotta remember that with Ground Slam it's going to be a lot of War Crash. It's fairly button intensive while leveling. I'm sure you could level it in different ways too. I'm sure you can level with Herald of Agony around like level 31, 28 whenever you have poison. That sounds horrible. It's not a great enjoyable skill to play. Yeah, I definitely recommend leveling with Ground Slam, and I did that myself. Early on, you kind of want to grab versatility to get dex and int. It's pretty much one of the first things I grab usually. Depends if you have stats on jewelry, and you can see it's a pretty straightforward, easy to follow skill tree. And just as an example of how Warcries work, and this is a Ground Slam build, you can see if I do Intimidating Cry, the number 3 pops up on Intimidating Cry, and if I now do Seismic Cry, the number 5 pops up. So let's do a quick explanation of that. The Intimidating Cry, that means that the next 3 attacks deal double damage, and with Seismic Cry, that gets powerful. The more powerful it is when the number is 1, so it's getting more and more powerful. Now you can see that Intimidating Cry has no numbers, we have to cry again, and now these like, especially the last one here, whenever the Seismic Cry is on 1, this is super powerful, and you can see that it has like some big AoE to it. So it's a lot of War Cries, and you use Vaal Ground Slam for bosses, and you absolutely obliterate everything. So very nice, enjoyable leveling experience. You can see for leveling here, you pretty much just grab like a random weapon. You can do dual wielding if you want to. You can do two-hander, is like by far the easier. There are some really good unique two-handers like Cauterizer and stuff like that. And other than that, just throwing an Essence of Contempt on a decent two-hander will get the job done. So, you know, pretty straightforward leveling stuff. And then at the end game, we have several skill trees, and we have like things that are important to mention for the build, like Elemental Equilibrium. I'll explain how that works and stuff later. Later on, we get a Stabilizing Scepter, which has Elemental Equilibrium into it, and we have different jewels. Also, do remember, I think it's around here, that you can use the Rapid Expansion for leveling Ground Slam. It'll give it a little bit more girth. We have like some jewels, which I'll explain quickly. We have Might of the Meek, which just, it's really good in this spot. Even makes this not too bad, makes it 1.2 life regen, and it makes some of these into like 7 and higher life regen, or sorry, percentage max life. Really good. Here we have a Thread of Hope, which lets us save some skill points, lets us grab like Runebinder without grabbing the points ahead of it. So basically you want a very large ring with as little minus res as possible. This goes from -10 to -20 res. But yeah, you can grab anything inside this circle, so it saves us some skill points. And then late game, I don't like this myself. I'm not a huge fan of building Xibaqua anymore because it's a very big investment with you need 2 Boarding Chaos Jewels. But we wanted to include that anyway. It is very strong, but it's a hassle to gear. But this is what that would look like if you were going to do it. And Xibaqua basically makes that you take half of all your elemental damage taken is taken as chaos. As for clusters, we have like a couple of things that are really good. One of the end game things we have is a Hypothermia helmet, and the way we're chilling enemies is by using a medium cluster with chilling presence. As for the other medium cluster you can do, and I really like this, is to have a Lead by Example and Cry Wolf. The Cry Wolf in particular makes your Enduring Cry at the end game always give you at least 1 endurance charge. That means that you just never drop out of endurance charges even if you're not taking damage. So because of that, I've taken Call to Arms. You can play without that, particularly on softcore, because most of the time you are going to be getting hit and triggering the Juggernaut Ascendancy that is giving you endurance charges. But on hardcore, sometimes that can be a good way to get killed if you've actually been dodging the entire boss fight and then suddenly get hit. If you go to the skills here as well, you can see we have the Herald of Agony links and everything like that. We have a leveling skill tree, and it should be very, very easy to follow, very step by step. And as always, we have a shit ton of notes. So if you run into any problems, you can go like here. I'm struggling with aura. I'm struggling with flask. I can't keep my poison up. On top of that, we also have like loads of different gear trees. So you can go here and browse through the different ones. And as you can see, pretty much like the max DPS you're gonna get out of this build, with it, which is like fairly min-maxed, and pretty much what I have on my character right now is around like 3.2 million damage. And getting to like 1.2, 1.5 isn't too hard, and you're still very tanky at that point. So we'll just do a quick math. This is actually a tier 16 eradicator. I wanted to show you guys a little bit of how the build is in action and how to play it. So it's not a very, very good mapper. You want to be a little bit careful at the start of maps as well. Depending on your setup, you might not start with endurance charges. But the way this works is I am throwing down my storm bands, and that is keeping the virulence stacks up. It's very, very easy, especially for maps, to keep up your virulence stacks and like have a large amount. And if you aren't familiar with how Herald of Agni works, the way it works is whenever you poison something, you're building virulence stacks, and the more virulence stacks you have, the more damage it has. And it actually has a surprising amount of damage without any investment. And that's why this is such a nice build, because we're able to build a large amount of defense. You gotta build defense, and then we're able to just focus on just running around the boss, which is really, really nice as well. Obviously, because it's not something where we have to like actively stand still and cast, we're able to just easily breeze around. And for mapping especially, I like to have Pierce, and then for like bosses, I would have something like Predator support instead of that. But all the gem links are in the POB and stuff. And you will notice a pretty big damage difference. Here we're coming up on Weaver, and what you can do as well, and if you've been watching me play this build, you'll see that sometimes I'll swap to a Gluttony and do a Flame Dash. What that does is one of our ascendancies has, if you've been hit recently, you gain endurance charges one per second, and there's a chance that you gain up to max. So sometimes before doing like Lab or something, or before doing Uber Elder, I will put on a Gluttony and do a Flame Dash. And then we'll put on Predator support here, because obviously this is a boss, and we want to be able to get a little bit extra damage. This is not a build that has like an insane amount of damage. Right now I probably have like 2.5 to 3 million. So it's definitely good, and I felt like pretty comfortable in things like Uber Elder and stuff like that. But if you're used to like a softcore glass cannon build, it might feel a little bit Z DPS. There are some really, really nice benefits to this. I'm a Juggernaut, so I don't get slowed from anything. No matter what, like there will be nothing, like even the Uber Elder and Elder pull, the one that like slows you down, that doesn't slow me down. So for this boss, I'm basically like running around trying to keep my Fortify up, and we're just running around, and that's a large amount of defense in itself. I haven't gone an insanely defensive route, but you do get so much tank just for being a Juggernaut. And yeah, we're keeping the Fortify up, which like we are getting through Vigilant Strike. And as you can see, like a lot of moves just aren't hitting me because I'm able to move around freely, which is truly like a big power of things like Stormband and obviously Poke. And that's pretty much how you play this. I have Molten Shell that I can proc whenever I want to. Some people like having that on mouse button 1 instead of Enduring Cry, but I really do want to try to make sure that my Enduring Cry is always up, so I have my endurance charges, and not just by being hit recently. Then we have Val Molten Shell we can proc as well. And yeah, pretty straightforward build to play. The helmet I'm using is like a super in-game one, so it's item level 86 Elder Helmet. It does have the Herald of Agni Restoration, which is the best enchant you can get. And then you have its minion damage and hypothermia and +3. So it's a very good helmet. It makes a very big difference getting that hypothermia. And then you could probably work around to get skitterbots in, but it's very hard to fit, just gem wise and restoration wise. Then you wouldn't necessarily need the chilling presence because your skitterbots would be chilling your enemies. So you do have some options there. And as you can see, it's just like not really nice for anything like ultimatums or mapping. It does get the job done, but it's obviously, it's no Winter Orb or something like that for mapping. Now, another thing that's important, and you saw when I was playing, is that we're using a Golden Rule. And the way Golden Rule works is poisons you inflict is reflected to you if you have fewer than 100 poisons. And you do get +1 Chaos Rest per poison. Now, a particularly scary thing here, and people fuck this up quite a lot, so both your lesser poison and poison can be pretty low level. You actually don't want them at level 1 or 2, because then it does so little damage that sometimes it'll do 0 to 2 poison damage when an enemy has resist. It'll get rounded down, so like level 4 to 6 or something like that is completely okay. You just want to make sure that your Stormbrand is poisoning. Now, at the point where I am right now, since I have a Circle of Nostalgia and this has base poison damage into it, I don't actually need lesser poison, and I can get like an anomalous, I think it is, poison, which has 80% chance to poison on hit. And I think right now, yeah, because that would put me at 100% and free up a gem slot. Let's talk a little bit about how EE works for the build, and we always want EE when we're playing Herald of Agni. So late game we have a stabilizing scepter which gives us elemental equilibrium without pathing there. However, let's talk a little bit about how elemental equilibrium works and why we're using it. So enemies you hit with elemental damage get plus 25 resist to those elements. If I'm hitting it with lightning damage, it's getting plus 25 lightning, but minus 50 cold and fire. And if we hover over here, you'll see that I'm doing lightning and chaos damage, which doesn't matter. And then when I hit it, it's going to get less cold resist, which is good because we're using hatred, which is on generosity. So our Herald of Agni is getting 26% fist damage as extra cold. We are also getting an additional 20% fist as extra cold here. So we do have a large amount of cold damage. So that is basically making our little Herald of Agni get a shit ton of extra damage, because that portion of cold damage will hit more when we are lowering that. And like the hypothermia, that's not just for the cold damage. The hypothermia will be all the damage we deal, because that's just damage against chilled enemies. So it'll actually be like even the chaos damage and fist damage will do more. So another thing I wanted to show you guys is the +1 physical spell skill gem recipe, and that's obviously very, very good for crafting a weapon here. And we have like loads of notes on crafting different weapons and even more in-game ones. Sadly, there's no like +1 spell skill gems, but yeah, that is like the end game. If you could get one with +1 spell, that's even better, especially if you can either fracture that or just add +1 physical to it later. With like augment physical would actually work. So here I have Wave of Conviction, which you can see has the tag. Well, actually has pretty much every tag, but it does have the physical tag. And it's also quality 20. And here we have Corrupting Fever, which has the physical tag as well. The recipe, if you're wondering what it is a total of +40 quality with everything having the physical tag. And this would work similar with lightning, fire, spell. So you could have like 10 different gems, doesn't matter. They just need to add up to a total of 40 quality, and everything needs to have the physical tag. So here we're just vendoring a white scepter, and now we're at +1 fizz. You can aug and regal that, and it'd be great if you hit something good, but most likely you're not going to. But even this is a pretty usable scepter. You could even multi-mod something like that. Maybe you hit some cast speed. That would be really good for the skill, because then you're building up virulent stacks faster. Another thing you could do as well is once you have the physical spell skill, you could just regal, craft cast speed on it, and then do the harvest reforge. More likely to hit the same things, and maybe you'll get a really high tier cast speed with still keeping the physical spell skills there. That is not guaranteed though, you might lose that. Now, especially late game, this can be a very, very hard build to resist cap. If you are on softcore, there's nothing necessarily wrong with resist capping by using endurance charges. If we get to max res charges here, we can see that we get a shit ton of resistance from endurance charges. This is fine on softcore. I would not go and do that on hardcore. The reason being nullifiers. It's a rare nemesis monster, and it can be on any monster, which is basically it removes all your buffs and everything like that. So definitely don't do it on hardcore. You could randomly die to it. But it's very, very hard to resist cap with this. So it's very, very easy to get one beefy ring with really, really good resists. I managed to fit in aspect of the spider as well, because I wanted more damage. I got a really, really beefy belt, prismatic catalyst, a really nice tier. I didn't even particularly care about my prefixes here, like the life and stuff didn't matter. I just wanted to get like really beefy resist. So this has like, yeah, insane amount of resist. We do get up to 40 on Grip the Council, and on boots as well. You really want to get as much as possible. Either you can buy like a super beefy base like this, might cost you like 5 to 10x for the base, or just use really good two-tone boots and get like a crazy amount of resist on those. Getting jewels with resist as well could be a good way to resist cap. So if you're able to find like a jewel like this with corrupted blood cannot be inflicted with you, but with like 24 or 40 resist, that would be absolutely amazing. And we'll talk a little bit about the gear I'm wearing too. Obviously something like this with the Herald of Agni has reservation is what is needed at the end to fit things like aspect of the spider and like being able to fit hypothermia and stuff. It can be very, very hard to fit, and you might need things like the reservation nodes. But we do have a lot of things we can do to make it fit. Everything should be very clear in the text notes part of the guide as well. Another thing you can use instead of Gluttony is you can use a Red Blade banner and actually just weapon swap and do an Enduring Cry. That will put you on max endurance charges as well. As for gear that is like super core of the build, you absolutely need a Golden Rule. You really, really want a Sappho's Frame. And Comb's Heart Grip of the Council is pretty big as well. You don't necessarily need a Circle of Nostalgia, and they're like a pain to get, but they will improve the build massively. And you don't need Comb's Ways either. You could use Rare Rings. I used Comb's Ways because they give it a lot of regen, extra endurance charges, and I was farming a lot of lab. So that was really, really good. Now, there are some things on the Atlas that this build can't run. One of the sextants that you could roll would be area contains a Gloom Shrine. The way that works is it actually makes a Chaos Explosion, and because we're using Herald of Agony, that explosion has a chance to poison, and because we are using the Golden Rule, this explosion, you basically one-hit yourself. We've had some videos on Reddit posted where people are like, what killed me? And people are like, yeah, you have a Gloom Shrine and Golden Rule. So that'll destroy you. I would stay away from any like that kind of explosion. So don't run Astanats, don't run Gloom Shrines, and you also don't want to run maps that have like you can't poison. So you need to poison. And also remember, with all the gear, make sure you check out the red text on all the items. There's loads of extra info talking about like extra tips on how to craft them, extra tips on what enchants are good, etc. So there's so much good stuff there. Bandits for the build is skill point. For anointments, we have things like Grave Pact is really, really good. And if you are struggling with reservation, you could do Discord Artisan as well. Pantheons for this build, I usually run Ralakesh and Solaris. Solaris is really, really good, and I've been very lazy with this, which is terrible. But the third or second upgrade, wherever you want to look at it there, the Erythophagia, don't know how to pronounce that, but the take no extra damage from critical strikes. This is huge on hardcore against things like the Shaper Balls, the Rain of Stars from Cyrus. So you really, really want that. So again, make sure you check out all the notes. This guide should be super in-depth, should cover everything you need. But if you do have any questions, drop by my channel on twitch.tv/Zizrin, and I should be able to answer everything. This is a build I have played a large amount, so should be able to help you no matter what. It's a very solid build and can do anything in the game. Hope you guys are enjoying these guides. Thanks so much for all the support. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.